It is said in the Puranas that on the northern slope of Arunachala, near the summit, a Siddha Purusha, a sage with supernatural powers, known as Arunagiri Yogi, sits beneath a banyan tree in an almost inaccessible spot, teaching in silence. There is a shrine or mantapam dedicated to him in the great temple of Tiruvannamalai. The story indicates that the grace of Arunachala, guiding men through Muna Diksha, or silent initiation, on the path of self-inquiry to liberation, though ever potent, had become inaccessible to the people of this spiritually dark age of Kali Yuga. Nevertheless, the symbolical meaning of the story does not make it any the less true literally. In fact, it happened one day about 1906 that Sri Bhagavan was wandering on the northern slope of the hill when, in a dry watercourse, he saw an enormous banyan leaf, large enough to serve a meal on. Presuming that it must have been carried down by the water, and wishing to see the tree which bore such leaves, he set out on an occasion to climb the watercourse up the hillside. After climbing steep and rugged parts of the hill, he reached a place whence he could see a large flat rock, and on it the banyan tree he was seeking, enormous and deep green in color. He was amazed to see such a tree growing on what looked like bare rock. He continued to climb, but as he was drawing near, disturbed a hornet's nest with his leg. The hornets flew out and attacked the offending leg in a fury of revenge. Sri Bhagavan stood still until they had finished, meekly accepting their punishment for having destroyed their home, but he took this as a sign not to proceed, and so returned to the cave. The devotees were getting anxious, as he had been gone a long time. When they saw him, they were appalled at the state of his leg, swollen and inflamed. He has since pointed out that the position of the almost inaccessible banyan tree, but he never again set out to reach it, and he discouraged any of his devotees who wished to do so. A group of devotees, among them an Englishman, Thompson by name, did once set out determined to find it. After climbing rather recklessly for some time, they found themselves in a precarious position that they dared proceed neither up nor down. They prayed to Bhagavan for help and somehow got back to the ashram safely. They never tried again. Others also have made the attempt, but without success. Even though Sri Bhagavan might disapprove of an action, it was very seldom that he would explicitly forbid it. Understanding as to what was appropriate or inappropriate had to come from within. In the present case, it was clearly not appropriate for his devotees to attempt what their master had refrained from. There was a time when Sri Bhagavan used to roam the hill frequently, as well as climbing to the summit and making pradakshina, the circuit, or circumambulation of the hill, so that he knew every part of it. And then one day, when he was wandering alone, he passed an old woman gathering fuel on the hillside. She looked like a common outcast woman, but she addressed the young Swami fearlessly as an equal. Beginning with the rough cursing common to such people, she said, "May you be put on the funeral pyre. Why do you wander about in the sun like that? Why don't you sit quiet?" Later, Sri Bhagavan said, when he told devotees about it, "It can have been no ordinary woman. Who knows who she was?" Certainly no ordinary outcast woman would have dared to speak to a Swami like that. The devotees took it to be a manifestation of Arunagiri Siddha, the spirit of Arunachala. From that time, Sri Bhagavan gave up roaming the hillside. When Sri Bhagavan first went to Tiruvannamalai, he sometimes moved about in a state of trance, as already described. This did not completely end until about 1912, when there was a final and complete experience of death. He set out from Virupaksha cave one morning for Panchamam Koil, accompanied by Palaniswami, Vasudeva Sastri, and others. He had an oil bath there and was nearing Tortoise Rock on the way back when a sudden physical weakness overcame him. He described it fully afterwards. The landscape in front of me disappeared as a bright white curtain was drawn across my vision and shut it out. I could distinctly see the gradual process. There was a stage when I could still see a part of the landscape clearly, while the rest was covered by the advancing curtain. It was just like drawing a slide across one's view in a stereoscope. On experiencing this, I stopped walking lest I should fall. When it cleared, I walked on. When darkness and faintness came over me a second time, I leaned against a rock until it cleared. The third time it happened, I felt it safer to sit, so I sat down near the rock. Then the bright white curtain completely shut off my vision. My head was swimming, and my circulation and breathing stopped. The skin turned a livid blue. It was the regular death, a hue, and it got darker and darker. Vasudeva Sastri, in fact, took me to be dead and held me in his arms and began to weep aloud and lament my death. I could distinctly feel his clasp and his shivering and hear his words of lamentation and understand their meaning. I also saw the discoloration of my skin and felt the stoppage of my circulation and breathing and the increased chilliness of the extremities of my body. My usual current of awareness still continued also. I was not in the least afraid and felt no sadness at the condition of the body. I had sat down near the rock in my usual posture and closed my eyes and was not leaning against the rock. The body, left without circulation or respiration, still maintained that position. This state continued for some 10 or 15 minutes. Then a shock passed suddenly through the body, and circulation revived with enormous force, and breathing also, and the body perspired from every pore. The color of life reappeared on the skin. I then opened my eyes and got up and said, "Let's go." We reached Virupaksha cave without further trouble. This was the only fit I had in which circulation and respiration stopped. Later, to correct wrong accounts that began to be spread, Bhagavan added, "I did not bring on the fit purposely, nor did I wish to see what this body would look like after death, nor did I say that I will not leave this body without warning others. It was one of those fits that I used to get occasionally, except this time it took a very serious form." What is perhaps most striking about this experience is that it was a repetition, heightened by actual physical demonstration, of that certainty of endurance through death which had constituted Sri Bhagavan's spiritual awakening. It recalls the verse from the sage from the Tamil classic, which Sri Bhagavan often quoted, that goes this way: "When overpowered by the wide expanse, which is without beginning, end, or middle, there is the realization of non-dual bliss." It may be that this marked the final completion of Sri Bhagavan's return to full outer normality. It is hard to give any impression of how normal and how human he was in his mode of life, and yet it is necessary, for the description of his previous austerity may leave the idea of someone who is grim and forbidding. On the contrary, his manner was natural and free from all constraint, and the newcomer immediately felt at ease with him. His conversation was full of humor, and his laughter so infectious, so like that of a child, that even those who did not understand the language would enjoy it. Everything about him and about the ashram was clean and tidy. When a regular ashram had been established, life in it followed a timetable as exact as work in an office. The clocks were kept right to the minute, the calendars up to date, and nothing was wasted. I have seen an attendant reproved for bringing out a new sheet of paper to bind a book when one already cut into could be made. And with food, too, not a grain of rice remained on his leaf plate when he finished eating. Vegetable peelings were saved for the cattle, not thrown away. There was a spontaneous simplicity and humility about him. One of the few things that aroused a show of anger in him was as if those who were serving food gave more of any delicacy to him than to others. He did not like people to rise when he entered the hall, but would make a little gesture to them to remain seated. He was walking slowly down the hillside to the ashram one afternoon, tall, golden-hued, white-haired already, and frail, stooping a little and leaning heavily on a staff on account of rheumatism. And he was with a short, dark attendant. A devotee was coming behind, so he drew to the side of the path, saying, "You are younger and walk quicker. You go first." It was a little courteous action, but so much from the master to the disciple. One could go on endlessly. Some of these points will come up more fittingly later, but now that there is mention of full return to a normal mode of life, it has to be indicated how normal, how intensely human, and how gracious that mode of life was.